Now then, unless you've been living in a hermetically sealed cave over the last week with no access at all to any electronics, you're likely very familiar with the story of Byron and Kristin Cabot. They are now the former CEO and HR manager, respectively, at the tech company Astronomer, who were recorded embracing a concert by the British rock band Coldplay about a week ago. Both have now resigned from the company. This incident, however, raised an interesting question. If this happened in a country like Nigeria or Kenya with those countries' data protection laws, would they have had a legitimate expectation of privacy in a concert? That's why I started my conversation with a Kenyan legal specialist in intellectual property and entertainment law, Liz Lenjo.
You know, at the end of the day, as an individual, you have the right to privacy, and privacy is not just within your home. It's within everything that you do as an individual, be it business, be it entertainment. So there is that expectation. And if anyone needs to do any or make any recording or, take any pictures, it must be done by way of consent. You must be informed that that is going to happen. So yes, there was an expectation of privacy, in my opinion.
Couldn't the organizers turn around and say, well, you might have an expectation of privacy, but if we say, look, this is a concert, there are going to be cameras here, and if you've bought a ticket and you essentially come to the grounds, right, there's implied consent, wouldn't that essentially be their defense in this case?
Well, unfortunately, under GDPR, there's no such thing as implied consent. Consent must be express. So which means then that the data subject must be aware of the consent that is about to be given. For what purpose are you, allowing any images or pictures of yourself to be taken? There has to be some transparency also on the part of this person that wants access to you, right? So that means then words like perpetuity or that flexibility to use in whatever way or to do whatever we wish, things like that. Such wording is frowned upon under GDPR. So transparency is really required as well, such that as an individual or as a data subject, you're informed in terms of what am I going to do with your pictures or your recordings? Where are they going to be placed? What am I going, I have to know everything about that.
For the sake of argument, if you're having a concert, 20,000 people, 30,000 people packed into a stadium in Lagos or in Cape Town or Joburg for that matter, any jurisdiction that sort of has laws that are comparable to GDPR, then how should they be thinking about navigating these issues of consent in order to avoid a situation like what happened in Coldplay's case? I mean, under American law, I guess they're not dealing with the same sort of liability. But if we're looking at it from an African context, with our laws heavily influenced by GDPR, how should concert organizers be thinking about this?
So these are still uncharted waters, I won't lie. But when just look at some of the jurisprudence we've seen in Kenya, it's been stated by like the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner that this consent must be express. So which means you'd have like multi-layer sort of approach in terms of the ticketing. There would be terms and conditions stating that, when you purchase this ticket, you are allowed to be filmed at the place. But again, qualify and say you will be filmed for the purposes of the following 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then a second layer would be prudent is at the venue of the concert. You have all these notifications as well that mirror the terms and conditions at the event. And then possibly also give some flexibilities for those who may not want to be seen in camera to find spots in which they can sort of maybe quote unquote hide, so that way at least there is no element of mandatoriness, like it's a must that you must be photographed. Because again, also when there's an element of it must happen, then again the issue of consent would be challenged and how that consent has been obtained.
Indeed. One last question for you. There's been an interesting development in Denmark, especially last month, and the government there essentially saying they're going to make legal amendments later on in the year, around autumn, to give people the right to copyright their body, their face, and their voice. And the argument here, and this, as I understand it, has cross-party support in Denmark, the argument here is that this is a necessary move in order to give individuals the right, or rather the legal tools they need to fight against the deep fakes, which are now much, much easier to make with the access to AI and a lot more computing power. What do you make of this development?
I think the execution will be interesting to see. Because when you look at what is protectable by copyright, we're looking at literary works, artistic works, sculptures, software and whatnot. So are we saying that we are both, bodies of art. That's a question, right? And yet we also have another body of law that deals with personality rights and, right of publicity. And already that gives, an individual the right to commercialize over their image, look, likeness, and whatnot. So it will be interesting to see how they will tackle this. And then, then the legal technocrats will get on it. But I think it's unnecessary in my view, if you asked me, because we already have other, tenets of law that are already in place.